The next phase was that because severe injuries to the entire circulatory system would have occurred and there would be outward signs to conceal, Dr. Jacobson would use that same process again after the sex assault, this time to produce a stroke. This is brain cells dying from lack of blood. This causes physical and mental incapacitation and loss of all functions. Consequently, I would not be able to prosecute any action. Truly a fate worse than death. Stroke is a common medical ailment, but when produced deliberately, it is also equal to the most severe criminal offenses, and that list would start with first-degree assault. Dr. Jacobson is a neurologist, and Johns Hopkins Suburban Hospital, where he runs an unlawful back surgery mill, which is very profitable to Johns Hopkins, would have no difficulty in controlling facts. I did not have a family doctor, and Dr. Kulkarni, a neurologist, was my only physician. Dr. Kulkarni agreed that she would second the false medical opinions of Dr. Jacobson. On the face of things, it would appear that I was very fortunate. The rules from Medicare, which apply to even non-Medicare patients, is that because there is a minute possibility of an allergic reaction or kidney problems when contrast injection is given, there has to be a freestanding agreement with the physician in the building. And this can be any physician, completely, even unrelated to unrelated to the MRI facility, a physician who would just act as a good Samaritan. So here, the good Samaritan is a neurologist, a specialist in strokes, and his Johns Hopkins Hospital is 5 blocks away. And my only existing physician is Dr. Kulkarni, also a neurologist, but she has already sold her patient in exchange for professional favors that were derived from VCU Med School, a Virginia government institution, and Innova, a non-profit heavily subsidized by governments. By a miracle, and also because I was very physically fit and have experience with extremes and other challenging circumstances, the body fought off the stroke and defeated the expert Hopkins neurosurgeon. Dr. Jacobson could still have killed me, but it would have been something other than a stroke, and there would also have been overt outward signs. All kinds of other injuries were occurring, and they had outward signs, and the coincidental stroke lie would not have worked. Consequently, Dr. Jacobson let me go. So also other things were happening to my body. With all the water, blood, and debris that were flowing down from the brain to the heart, blockages occurred in those giant veins. As a compensation mechanism, the normally unseen veins in the upper chest became engorged and allowed for a bypass around the blockages. Additionally, swellings formed underneath the eyes, and this was from pressure backing up. When water was flushed up into the brain via the arteries in the left arm, water was also being flushed backwards up to the exit of the heart and the aorta. These regions were also suffering injuries. With the stroke, the injuries would be limited to the brain. But now there is aorta injury, heart injuries, and central vein injuries. So anyway, the MRI has something like a black box. It documented much of the activities, including the facts that the initial injection had never failed. He just had a pretext for giving that unlawful second injection. So anyway, it took 9.5 minutes to set up the unlawful catheter and 1.5 minutes more to make the final preps and add the extension line. After the last set of images, there is 50 minutes that is unaccounted for. The whole process, which should have taken 40 minutes, took 2 hours. And now, nearly 3 years later, in December 2015, in a legally recorded phone call with Miss Miller, that receptionist from Capital Imaging, she repeatedly tells me to file malpractice action and complaints to the Physicians Board against all of them. The one thing that medical providers don't admit to is malpractice, but here, to get out of jail, they seek to say it is all about malpractice. Miss Miller's contact with me was to be limited to giving me a form to fill out, accepting my payment, and giving me a receipt. I did not suffer any injuries from those actions. When asked if Dr. Jacobson was a supervising physician, I substituted the word supervising, but what I was talking about is the Good Samaritan. And Miss Miller understood what it was. So she said she had to look it up because there are 5 physicians upstairs. I reminded her that I was talking about February 15, 2013. And then she hung up. So because she couldn't answer. So then because actually Dr. Jacobson was the only physician in that building for many years. It was only after his criminal offenses against me that he sold the Bethesda neurology practice to the Johns Hopkins health system, and the other Hopkins physicians came on board. Dr. Jacobson was also named the director of neurosurgery at the Hopkins owned suburban hospital. This weasel and the Hopkins people appears to be sheltering, appears to be giving this guy shelter and protection under this giant healthcare entity. So I told Ms. Miller that my doctors, including cardiologists and neurologists, need my full medical history, and that the report Capital Imaging reported about there being no complications could just not be true. Ms. Miller, without hesitation, yelled out, "You walked out of our office!" Ms. Miller was very loud and aggressive until this point of the discussion. She literally meant that I should be fortunate that I walked out of the office because they were trying to kill or severely incapacitate. Because of her sudden silence, I said, "I'm sorry," with the meaning that I don't understand. "Could you please repeat?" as in excuse me. She remained silent, and then I asked, "I walked out of where?" It sounds like the cat got her tongue, and you can actually hear her forming her escape, and so she has a very extended "did you," and then adds in say something when you left our office. She's just making the stuff up now. I replied that I contacted their office about a month following the incident. She quickly conceded, and it was Ms. Miller in the early part of the same discussion who said that several emails were received. In no way did she mean, "Did I register a complaint?" She actually meant, "I left alive and not incapacitated." Ms. Miller tells me the procedure to get my medical records, and when I tell her that I already have that document and asked her to verify if it was the one that says electrically signed, she replied in a conversation that she cannot speak to me until I am ready to have a rational adult conversation. When I asked her a second time about electrically signed, she hung up because the electrically signed was very significant because the interpretation that was created and signed. Now, although Dr. John Athos, because when I did ask her about if it was the interpretation that said electrically signed, ELECTRICALLY rather than electronically. Okay, that's what it says on the page. It says electrically signed when the word is electronically. And so when I asked her, so the first time she said I need to have a rational adult conversation because she didn't want to answer this question, and the second time she hung up. Okay, so Dr. Athos is a radiologist that gives the interpretations for the MRI test, and he's also part of all of Capital Imaging's unlawful schemes. But he's listed as a medical director, but he's physically in New York. So initially Dr. Athos was out of the loop with regard to my matter. Someone else forged an interpretation and signed off as electrically signed by John Athos, board certified radiologist. It is common knowledge that the word is electronically. I thought for a long time that it was Mr. Papel, the tech, who does not have good English skills, who dummied up this report. But the error is too great. And this was not the work of Mr. Papel. The forged report was actually the work of Dr. Jacobson using dictation software. Dr. Jacobson is a surgeon, and it is surgeons who always write by voice because their hands are not free. The physician's version of this software recognizes medical words. The word electrically is free. The word electrically, ending in C-A-L-L-Y, is frequently used, most frequently with the ECG or the EKG. But electronically is only a computer term and it's not part of the medical lexicon. Dr. Athos would have some password that when given to a computer by writing or by voice would imprint his template signature. But when Dr. Jacobson had to write in Dr. Athos's signature, he had to say it out loud. And if you know about Dr. Jacobson, he does his surgeries and stuff very fast, right? That's how he makes the money for himself and Johns Hopkins, where he does the surgeries very fast and injures patients along the way. And in the same way, it looks like he put together this bogus interpretation very fast, and he did not notice that there was this kind of a typographical error. But anyway, so after that happened, I really had some minor problems, and I was really seeing, the tip of the iceberg. So I went to see my doctor, Dr. Kulkarni, on March 26, 2013, and reported there have been some minor problems. And Innova uses the Epic software, which is the top-of-the-line software, and the report received from Capital Imaging was to be logged in, and the report placed in the appropriate electronic folder. Instead, the system showed that the login for the system showed that the test was not done. So the system said that my MRI test was not done and no report was received. And even the nurse who was trying to look for it could not find the report. But Dr. Kulkarni was able to dig it out from some miscellaneous folder. So what happened is, after that, they went and took this dummy report and they stuck it into my medical file somewhere, but it was not accessible to anyone else but Dr. Kulkarni, and it did not come in by the usual route. Okay, so anyway, so I liken the actions of Dr. Kulkarni with the captain of a commercial airliner who is in cahoots with the hijackers. Dr. Kulkarni, in the physical exam column, reported only a couple of sentences. It must be noted that throughout the report, statements are vague and not definite, except for this portion. It could be said that the brief statement hits a home run for Dr. Kulkarni's hijacker conspirators. It first states patient is in no acute distress, and this is a common non-specific statement. But the remainder of the statements are: he is alert, face is symmetrical, tongue is midline, gait is normal. That's all of the report of the physical exam. This is the precise report that is given by a neurologist that seeks to determine by physical exam whether or not a patient suffered a stroke. If the face is symmetrical, tongue is in the midline, and the gait is normal, that's confirmation that there was no stroke. When looking back at the full neurological exam from the first visit, findings about face being symmetrical and tongue position at the midline are not part of Dr. Kulkarni's neurological exam. The final item noted that the patient is alert. When looking at the word alert in the exam from the initial visit, it is said to be a notation of the level of consciousness. This kind of reporting was a standard component of the full exam, but when it is reported as part of a limited exam, it means that this was an area of concern. The level of consciousness represents the coma scale. But anyone who drives a third of the beltway to reach his doctor's office would not be anything other than fully alert. There is no value of this item on the records other than to state that the ones to which she sold for her professional opinion. She sold her patient just to say that they did not commit those offenses.